I hereby call this meeting to order. It's the Smart Cities and Service Improvements Committee. Smart Cities and Service Improvements Committee, meeting to order. Sorry, when I'm new, I'll be here all month. A little special shout out to our friends viewing on live stream on YouTube and Facebook. And of course, everyone here who made the time to be here in chambers. I am Councilmember Lund Diep. I am your chair for the time being. And we are ready to begin. Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Jimenez.
Here.
Councilmember Jones.
Here.
Mayor Licata.
Present.
Chair Lund Diep.
Present.
We have a quorum.
All right. Are there any changes to the printed agenda? No? All right. Then on to consent calendar. Do we get a motion?
So moved.
All right. There's no items consent. Do we need to approve anything? All right. Well then. Shall I cut corners and move on anyway? All right. All right, I'm excited to be chairing this committee. Thanks for the assignment, Mr. Mayor. We are the capital of Silicon Valley and the heart of innovation, and I really feel that it's important for us as a city to claim that mantle, and I believe a lot of that good work putting us there will be coming through this committee. So I'm excited. Take it away, Kip.
Thank you, Chair Diep, Mr. Mayor, members of the committee, members of the public. Kip Harkness, Deputy City Manager. As you know, the city's first ever innovation roadmap was created in 2016 to focus our efforts on being the most innovative city in North America by 2020, a deadline which is fast approaching. We've now taken the next step and expanded that to our Smart Cities roadmap, our 2.0. Our team has spent the last several months working with individual departments to create a kind of grassroots, bottoms-up view of 160 smart cities projects, and then prioritizing them and aligning them with the strategies and policies that you've set at the strategic level. No other city in North America that we know of has taken such a holistic approach that is working both with the department staff and senior leadership. Our ask of the committee today is that we help you understand, come to agreement, and hopefully commitment around these high priority projects and small wonders. The agreement that these are the right, understand that these are the high priority projects and small wonders, agree that these are the right projects to focus on, and commit to our roadmap and the ongoing cadence. We'll have Reggie Nair present, our Smart City Manager, and she'll walk you through. It's a fairly solid presentation, so we'll take a pause at several points to get your feedback and direction on any modifications that we want to make. Again, this is our kind of final launch point for this, so if there are changes that we want to make or you want to direct us, this would be the ideal time to do that as a committee. So with that, I will ask Reggie to walk us through our Smart City Roadmap 2.0.
Thank you, Kip. Welcome, Mr. Chair, Mayor, and members of the committee, and also of the public. My name is Reggie Nair. I'm the Smart City Manager for the Civic Innovation Team. Just overview, we really reached a milestone, just reiterating what Kip has mentioned, that we've defined an approach for our city to embrace innovation through the use of the Smart City Roadmap 2.0. So for today's key objectives, we wanted to take a step back and recap the purpose of the Smart City Roadmap 2.0. Since the inception of the Innovation Roadmap 1.0, we recognize and value that the roadmap promotes collaboration. It provides an opportunity to help and understand the needs, whether it may be resourcing or removing roadblocks, so that we can move forward in executing these innovative projects. Most importantly, it helps us manage for success. It is important for the City of San Jose to continue to lead and share our stories on the success we've achieved. As we mature in our approach towards innovation, our goals for today's presentation are the following. Understand, agree, and commit to the high priority Big Rocks projects and process and projects for the small wonders. Understand, agree, and commit to the future status reporting for the innovation team and committee. So here's today's agenda to help you navigate through this presentation. As it was mentioned earlier by Kip, given the depth of this presentation, we'll take pauses at various points throughout, so for the committee to ask any questions. So just now, I went over the key objectives. And next, I will provide a brief recap on the development of the Smart City Roadmap 2.0. Then Rob and I will take a deep dive in discussing the various components of the Smart City Roadmap. And Rob will start off by sharing the city's accomplishment and progress with the IT roadmap. And afterwards, I will discuss the process to identify high-priority Big Rocks projects. The third part of the Smart City Roadmap 2.0 that is becoming increasingly and equally important, I will discuss in depth the process and projects for the small wonders. Then I'll share with all of you a proposal on how we plan to build capacity to support the Small Wonders pipeline. And I'll wrap up the presentation in how we plan to establish a cadence for reporting the status of these projects. So our approach on what we focus on and what we choose to work on is based on three questions. Is it important to a lot of people? Does it cause a lot of pain? Is it core to what we do as a city? And is it achievable at scale through technology or process improvements? And where these circles intersect in the Venn diagram that is shown on the left of the slide is the sweet spot where we've identified we can make a difference and have a greater impact. So in January 2017, the city unveiled the first ever Innovation Roadmap 1.0 that identified 22 Big Rocks projects, as shown on the right of the slide. But since then, we were asked by the committee to broaden and deepen our approach, our work around innovation. So we recognized that the Smart City Roadmap needed to be comprised of three parts: the IT roadmap, which starts at the brilliant at the basics, the Big Rocks, which is the innovation as impact, and the Small Wonders, for the space for the small experiments and emerging technologies. This approach will give the city the flexibility it needs to embrace innovation. So with the adoption of the Smart City Vision back in 2016, it has tremendously helped the city of San Jose to set its course to be the most innovative city by 2020. Last fall, we presented to the committee how we intend to implement the vision through the establishment of 7 themes. These 7 themes you see before you embodies the core services that we provide to our community, and it presents a more holistic view of how we approach our work around the smart city innovation being done in the city of San Jose. It is intentionally broad to allow our departments to have the flexibility to deepen and broaden our approach towards innovation. Underneath each of these themes, we've identified several strategies. The purpose in identifying strategies is to help departments understand and develop overall goals, project outcomes, and metrics that will ultimately help measure our successes. Defining a strategy was based upon the approach and success that was used to develop the broadband strategy that eventually helped ignite a public-private partnership between the city of San Jose and the telecommunication industry. Each of these strategies are color-coded per the key shown on the bottom left-hand corner, showing whether it was developed, in process, or planned for the future. So we shared with all of you and the departments that we're doing a lot of innovation. And as you saw in the Smart City Roadmap 2.0 last fall, there were several projects that had been identified by departments that are either in progress, and what you see in the column that's green, yellow, and magenta, and then what's initiating, which is what's shown in that sky blue color, or what's in backlog, that's shown in gray. Fortunately, being the capital of Silicon Valley, we are showered with great ideas. However, we need to focus and prioritize that have been identified on the Smart City Roadmap 2.0. And more importantly, now that this is year 3, the adoption of the Smart City Roadmap, since the adoption of the Smart City Roadmap Vision, the Smart City Vision, we have a commitment to the committee that we intend to execute. We want to ensure that these projects are executed for success. It is important to recognize that all the stakeholders involved, developing and executing the Smart City Roadmap 2.0 is essentially one team to help deliver these innovation projects. Our goal with the Smart City Roadmap 2.0 is to ensure that we always promote more collaboration, understand department needs, and ultimately manage for success. Staying true to this approach, we can continue to be the most innovative city by 2020.
So we realize that that's a bit of a teaser trailer, but we wanted to pause at this point and see if there are any feedback or questions on sort of the basics of the approach before we launch into the details, or if you just want to plow ahead into the specifics of the projects.
Councilmember Jimenez.
What I was hoping you'd share with me is the primary differences between 1.0 and 2.0, and curious. Certainly I wasn't here, but want to better understand the evolution and how we got to where we are.
Yes, certainly. If you could slip back to slide 5. So the primary difference is if you looked at 1.0, all that 1.0 had in it is what we would now call the big racks category. It didn't span backwards into some of the structural basics that are part of the IT roadmap, and it didn't push forward very far into kind of this pure innovation work on small wonders. So you see two things that are different between the 1.0 and the 2.0. It's broader, including both the IT and the pure innovation, and it's deeper in terms of including many more projects as our capability to do innovation has increased in the city. So those are the two primary differences between the 1.0 and the 2.0.
And if I may, have to admit, I'm not too familiar with the idea of big rocks. That just means big ideas?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's it's actually a term that comes from Stephen Covey, and the idea is that each of us, all of us, have thousands of things that we might do in a given day or with our life, and that if we just sort of let all the small stuff come at us and don't prioritize the most important things, that we can get we can be very busy without getting a lot done. And so the idea is prioritizing those things which have the biggest impact, and those we shorthand as our big rocks. At the same time, we also don't want to miss an opportunity that might be seemingly small, and where the small wonders come in is they allow us to check out new ideas, innovative projects, things that might have a huge impact but we don't know very much about, but do that quickly. So the big rocks is a shorthand for it's very important and we think it can be executed at scale.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Jimenez, I appreciate that you're new to this. And so one other thing I would point out, Virginie, if you can go back to slide 4. Some of the challenges we had in working with our external stakeholders, the tech industry, was if you look at the Innovation Roadmap 1.0, you'll see nothing there about climate smart or ESD or sustainability. And so one of the differences, another difference between 1.0 and 2.0 is as we said, we took a more holistic approach, and that was, what does that mean? What it means is that roadmap, we kind of took our best guess at what was the important things going on based on what feedback we got from some of our discussions. In 2.0, we met with every department in the city several times so they could tell us exactly what to them was the highest priority projects they're doing in the smart city and innovation space.
Thank you for that. The other question I had is, as we continue to be innovative, I imagine at some point we may go to 3.0, and is that just going to further expand some of this as we develop new things in the city? I suspect it is.
Yeah, and the kind of the beauty and the terror of taking an agile methodology is we don't really know what 3.0 is yet, but I think you're right, we will be there. And we'll probably discover it the way that we've gotten to the 2.0, which is figuring out things that really work well or areas where we're falling short, and then modifying and correcting as we go. Some of the big push toward the 2.0 was the legitimate criticism that we weren't focusing enough on some of these small, interesting projects, and also that we weren't pushing ourselves to go as broadly across the organization as we should. So we'll be doing a 3.0. We don't know what that is yet.
Okay. And would you say that the small, interesting projects like self-driving vehicles and things like that, right? I think that fell in that category. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, we've got a piece coming up with more detail on those small wonders, and I think if we could hold maybe a specific question until then.
Yeah, so the question is more, well, I guess I'll hold. I'm just curious if most of those small wonders are technology related. You know, there's as I've alluded to before in other meetings, there's a host of other things that I think we can work well in the innovation space if we really dedicated time, and I'm curious.
Right, and I agree, and this is where this slide is actually really, I think, important again, and what we work on, you know, you see there's only one circle that deals with technology here, and which is, we think the first two circles, is it important to a lot of people, is it causing them pain or annoyance, and is it core to what the City of San Jose can and should do? We like to think, and we're trying to make that speak directly to some of the points that you've raised in other venues, which is, what are the things that are actually important to people? And where we're focusing ourselves on technology is, yes, we are about technology and process improvement, but if and only if they are actually important to people in San Jose, and it's something that we as a city can lead. So we've tried to have everything, big rocks and small wonders on the roadmap, be something that actually matters. Some of them will be much more technology focused, but each of them should also be important to our citizens, or we shouldn't be doing it.
Thank you. That helps clarify. Appreciate it.
Mayor Liccardo?
Thanks, Chairman. I really appreciate the presentation so far. As we look at 2.0, you know, some of the most valuable work I know that's being done is around process improvement. And a couple years ago, we kind of took on and created our version of Denver's Peak Academy, as I recall, and trying to sort of spread the gospel and get employees directly engaged in improving processes within their own wheelhouse. And I'm just wondering, is that work, and I think, as I recall, Michelle was leading that work, as I look at the list of themes and strategies for Smart City Roadmap implementation, that's slide 8, I think, I'm just wondering, are we just focusing that, for example, on key items under user-friendly government like procurement, or is that still sort of a roving team that's working with lots of folks?
It's not the full team that we'll need. It's, at this point, we're using the work that you refer to will emerge out of our digital services strategy. We're doing that work already in two primary areas. One is My San Jose, the 5 main services are there. We're undergoing some serious process improvement there. And then as we look at our website and the update of our city website, which is underway and is in beta right now, please play with it, we are looking at the primary services that people use and looking not only at what does it look like in terms of the user experience, but what's the underlying business process. So what we've realized, and what you'll see more of as we go into the budget process, is that we need to have a comprehensive digital services strategy that identifies, hey, here's the top 10 or the top 15 processes that need to be redesigned, and here's how we train the people in those departments to do that, plus allow people who want to do kind of the spontaneous process improvement work to move forward. So to date, to be candid, our process improvement work has been largely limited to the services within My San Jose or the other ones that are on the roadmap, but we agree and we think there needs to be a much broader approach to process improvement that empowers frontline workers to do this work, but we need to do that strategically as well.
Okay, so thank you, Kip, for that. So the work then is limited to My San Jose. It would include procurement strategy?
We've called out procurement strategy as a separate piece because part of what we've realized, and your office has been very in the forefront of helping us realize this, is that is probably the primary bottleneck to doing all of this at this point. So if there's one kind of critical path item, it's our ability to procure. We're having more procurements than we've ever had before. They're at bigger dollar amounts than they've ever been before, and they're different and more complicated. And so without a significant support of that team and a shift in the way that we approach that business, we can do a lot of really interesting talking, but we may not be able to acquire the tools that we need. So that procurement strategy, which you see at the bottom just because it's fairly recent, needs to rapidly accelerate to be a developed and executed strategy in order to facilitate all of the others. Without it, I would say we are at risk on many of the items in the roadmap.
So, okay, so Michelle and other folks will be working in that space as well. I assume it would also be in development services, but I don't see development services specifically listed here.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good catch. It probably should be up here because it's on the roadmap. It's a roadmap item, so I think we can call it out as a strategy because, as you very well know, the development services transformation includes a heavy emphasis on process improvement.
Yeah.
And Dolan and Keshav will also be leaning in to the procurement strategy as well. We're kind of putting together a little bit of a strike team in coordination with Julia Cooper and others to really deep dive into this, and it's rapidly becoming a high priority.
Okay, great. And then I also noticed my San Jose is listed under Climate Smart. And I understand it may be hard to find a place to stick it. Well, I guess it would be, I would have guessed it would have been under user-friendly government, but why did it end up under Climate Smart?
Yeah, it could go, it's one of those ones where it's a coin toss. It was really about what we realized as we clarified the outcomes of My San Jose is most of it is really about a clean, engaged resident. And you could easily put it either place or both. But part of the clean piece related to some of the climate part. So it's up for debate and could certainly be either or both.
Cool, thanks.
And Mayor, just a couple of other comments on process. I think you're going to see in the second presentation on the work plan, all the process improvements we've been making about our permitting capability, which actually I think probably from a performance perspective are some of the biggest leaps we've made in the last couple of months. So also the broadband strategy would also include process improvements.
Great, thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. One is on the Smart City Roadmap 2.0 background document. Obviously, it's broken down by in progress, initiating, and backlog, and you have it color coded. Is there a second layer to this where we can reference updates in terms of where they are and have some specific detail?
Yeah, you're anticipating our next section a little bit, and we'll talk about kind of reporting cadence and how we actually know whether these are on track or not. Much of the second layer is internal at this point. And still somewhat under development, but there is a next layer of planning, the next layer of work on this.
Okay, and then I just want to make a comment on the procurement strategy. Not only do we have to have the capability to procure, whatever technology we need to, but also to manage the cost and the risks associated with those procurements, which we're starting to discover can be pretty painful.
Right, and interestingly, just to go into that a little bit, because it's very important, I think that means that we make sure that the highest risk and the highest cost ones get a lot of attention. That may mean that some of the lower cost, easier, straightforward items, we actually spend a little bit less time worrying about all of the details on because they're more established. But those big projects, which we know are going to be complicated, they require a lot of work.
Great, thank you.
Seeing no further questions, go ahead, Kip.
Okay, keep us rolling, Reggie.
Thank you. Next, we have Rob to share the city's accomplishments and progress with the first part of the Smart City Roadmap 2.0 IT roadmap.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, committee members, and members of the public. Rob Lloyd, I'm the Chief Information Officer for the City of San Jose. So this section actually is a slice and goes to some of the comments and questions that you've been raising. A piece and a foundational piece of the innovation roadmap has been the technology foundation for the city. And we talked about that in a couple different ways. First came from the San Jose Smart City Vision of 2016, where Council said that information technology could no longer serve as a back office function and needed to step forward and become a strategic asset for the city. So Council had required that the city perform an IT strategic plan and raise those items so it can support the vision items that were defined in the San Jose Smart City Vision. In 2017, then, we came back to Council, and the committee and Council, and you approved the IT strategic plan around some of the strategies and investments that we need to make sure that technology could serve that role. So around the background that Reggie has formed, as well as your questions, what we're going to go through now is the IT strategic plan, the status updates, and where we are on those strategic initiatives that we had defined with you. So in a whole, what we discovered was there was a lot of, from the assessments and the analysis work we did, a lot of deficits that we call tech debt in the city. So through the decade of deficits, there were a lot of investments and short-term strategies that were used to kind of close those gaps. But as with all debt, it always comes due. And we're starting to see where those were impacting the city in terms of skill and personnel, systems that were starting to fail, and difficulties transitioning to more transformational projects. And we talked about how that was going to be resolved over time. And Kip had a great catchphrase for that, which was becoming brilliant at the basics. So if you're going to get fit and change the game, then you do have to start somewhere and make sure that your foundations are covered. So we, with an IT advisory board of top executives in this space, working across the city departments, we had a little over 160 meetings with city departments. We identified and coalesced around 4 main strategies. One was rebuilding the IT organization in terms of the people. One was securing the city because we could see the portfolio of the city was going to have a lot more devices, an exponential increase of data, and an inability to plan, manage, and handle all of that capacity. We also talked about modernizing and replatforming the city onto modern technology so that we could get the kind of millstone of old systems off of people's necks so we could focus on the transformational work. And we also talked about the execution and sustaining of technology. And we called out back then that we as an organization were about to, as we stepped into innovation, see some places where we would fall down. And that was partly because of the investment pattern that had existed, where we had left people's skills and the leanness of the organization. So we said, how are we going to account for that and try to close those gaps as much as possible? Council also had a few initiatives that it specifically called out. One was the IT strategic plan. One was a CRM system that became My San Jose. And one was audits because there were a number of audits to resolve. And so IT has been addressing those with our peer departments along the way, have made major strides and had a few misses as well, but we want to be upfront and clear about the active priorities that we have right now running. We are in the last leg of the IT strategic plan, so 2019 will be where we conclude the first and then move into the second. But to be upfront with you, and we will go into more detail with you in March, April, where we'll have a deep dive into strategic plan items and all the initiatives that we covered. But over the last 2.5 years, we completed the HR system, put in a new payroll, or updated the payroll system, a new budget system, a new talent management system, replaced the utility billing system, did a new work comp system. We did My San Jose. So we've been actually going through that portfolio to get us to the state where we can then be more transformative. And that really is the goal, is as we modernize and get these items handled, then we get to a state where when departments have ideas, where we have those partnerships with businesses, we can get to yes very quickly, commit, and then deliver on those things. So in terms of the color coding, just to step on it, we have dark blue is done. The greens are things that are in flight and going well. The reds are things where we still have to pay some attention and resolve. And the yellows are where there's manageable issues, but we want to be upfront that there are issues with those projects. And the light blues are, hey, we didn't think about these before, but they are important and we need to account for them now. So, and I apologize, Mr. Chairman, I looked for a superhero icon, but my iconography was limited. But I was looking for someone with a cape or a shield on the Change the Game one, but all I could do was some champions. So this is the theme of what we're trying to do, is get brilliant at the basics. We've identified some races that we want to win through the strategies. Then we'll get to a state where we can change our game. And that's where we all want to occupy as much time as we can. But there is some price to pay to get there. And the net result of this is that the city becomes a platform. So as council members, as you work with the community, as departments say we need service improvements, all of that's connected, it's interoperable, the skills are where they need to be, and we're not holding ourselves back in ways that make no sense. So on the bottom, you'll see kind of those philosophies. We eliminate the tech debt, and then we enable ourselves. So with that, and with the knowledge that we'll come back with a deeper dive in March, April, we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Councilmember Jimenez.
Looking back at the color coding, I think My San Jose 2.0, it was coded as yellow was some challenges, and I'm curious if you could elaborate as to what those are, because I think that's very important app that provides a lot of the connectivity with the residents.
Sure. So I'll take the first stab at it, but I know that Kip will have some input as well. So we are, the main driver on the yellow is we're behind schedule. So we had wanted to have the procurement out, had a goal for that for November, December. But what we're trying to do with this is a very different type of endeavor than just rolling out a CRM system. So matching the transformational and the kind of the peak academy digital services, how do you re-engineer processes in the city to be better and provide that higher value, then connect it with the technology systems that we have, the app, the website, the chat, and the other mediums that we have to communicate with the community. That's taken a bit longer to define and pin down. And so Michelle has the lead on that. We've restructured around that to feed as much attention and resourcing as we can to get there. But we do want to be upfront that we're running a bit behind on that endeavor.
Mayor Liccardo.
Just to follow up on Councilmember Menez's question, have we clearly defined what additional features we want in 2.0, or is that still to be determined?
Yeah, 2.0 is still the refinement of the existing features and getting it to the platform where we begin to add new services. So we do have a backlog of new services that we would look at adding, but a lot of the core work is making sure that the platform is scalable and that the business processes on the existing services are the best that they can be, and that we have a way when we add a new service on both of integrating into the technology and rapidly doing the business process re-engineering. And so we've spent a little bit more time than we wanted kind of going around on that, and now we've locked in a tighter governance structure, and we find ourselves behind on the procurement side and on the movement side. We don't see any issues that will stop us, but we are delayed.
Yeah, understood. I mean, I think we all expect there's going to be a lot of updates in the life of my San Jose, and I know there's a lot of challenges we're working through. You know, I'm only one vote out of 11 here, but my gut would say, recognizing we're not going to be able to get it all done, need that elephant in one bite. That we focus on the stuff that we think are the greatest pain points and maybe the most highly valued services, and leave a lot more for 3.0 and 4.0, just because I think what we really want is a service that we all regard as reliable, and our residents regard as reliable and effective. And you know, so anyway, I know you're taking a lot of input. I just thought I'd throw one more out there. The other question I had really had to do with the tech debt that you've got at this point, Rob. Can you quantify that?
So we can in a couple different ways. One is when we take a look at the city auditor's annual report. Part of it's just capacity because we haven't restored the organization. And we still are much smaller than in terms of technology, staffing, and resourcing than we were 10 years ago. Another is in terms of tech debt, what we run on. And fortunately, Council has made some investments where we're starting to resolve the infrastructure layer of that, so servers, systems, networking. And you awarded in December, Council did, the replacement of that. So we are slated to actually have fresh infrastructure for folks in terms of compute in roughly July. Another piece is the skills that we have in the organization. A lot of our skilling is circa 2007, 2010. And so we have to, as we adopt these technologies, and why the Small Wonders actually is very beneficial, is you learn as you go. But we have a lot of gap as we try to keep everything running. How do you get people to know where they're going to be in the future and build that skill set before it gets there?
And just to give a quick illustration of this, so for example, somewhat ironically, the limitations of tech debt are revealed the more innovative we are. So for example, our traffic management folks do some amazing stuff. As the work that they do becomes more sophisticated, they're able to use more visual tools. They're running on CPUs and GPUs, graphic processor units, which were not designed to process that kind of data. So if anybody has a teenager or knows a teenager who video games, imagine telling them to work on a 2004 box for their video game, and they would laugh at you. And yet we find ourselves in some similar situation. So it's a combination. It's all of those refreshes and resets that we have to do to pay down that tech debt. And it's not insignificant in cost. And I think there will also need to be some structural elements to it, because we haven't necessarily created the ongoing investments to do that, because it's not we refresh it now and we never do it again. It's an iterative, ongoing piece. And so, again, all of that will be part of the larger budget dialogue, but we want to be kind of sound the note that this is significant and important to achieving where we want to go.
And if I can add on that, some of that comes from the questions that council and the committee has asked. So structurally, as we address those tech debt issues, how do we do those citywide too, rather than in pieces of the organization? But the analog I would give you is, in some places we're trying to play Fortnite on an Atari and it just doesn't work. And so we do have to get to a place where, as the demands of the city are there, we've planned for them, we've accounted for them, we've built the skills for them, and in the budget process you will see some of those requests.
I enjoyed my Atari, by the way, so I think it still works. But anyway, so, I mean, I know this is a problem of money and it's a problem of people. Also, I understand, Shereen told me we have something like 24, 25 RFPs and implementations coming up in IT this year. Are all those going through your department, Rob?
No, the 24, 25 are, but there's actually 60 IT procurements in whole that the procurement office and we try to prioritize together. And right now,
you're involved in all 60?
We have a review step. And so for security and for technology interoperability, we do look at all of them.
Right.
But we actually run, I think there's 24 of them is IT. But that's all running through 2 people right now.
Right. Okay. So I hope we can talk more about that in the budget process.
Yeah, and we can certainly bring that back as an item to go into depth here as well, because, again, we view it as a critical bottleneck.
Yeah, it seems to be, and it's something we've got to fix, I know, because so much of it depends on our ability to get these tools in the door. And then finally, the modernization fund is in red. Is that directly related to the tech debt? Is that our sinking fund that you're trying to create?
Yeah, so it is wise when you have investments like bridges and roads that you also account for the replacement of them at the end of engineered life. And we don't have one. It's just not been fundable. But we put it up there because it's the right thing to do. And if we can figure out a way, we should start putting money away for those major systems we know have to be replaced and maintained.
Okay, thanks.
Vice Chair Jones.
Thank you, Chair. One quick comment on My San Jose 2.0. I agree with everyone that we should focus our energies on the priorities of our residents, but we also have to make sure that whatever we focus on, that can be supported on the back end. Because one of the things I don't want to have is a level of expectations from our residents that once they submit something through My San Jose, that it's going to work and work seamlessly. And then my other question is on the financial system upgrade. I was looking for it on the portfolio map, and I didn't see it. Maybe it's just my bad eyesight, but.
So under Modernize and Execute, the second one over on that top layer is the financials upgrade. To be clear on that, this is an upgrade of our current system, roughly 30 plus years old. Was designed on a flat file structure originally. So we got our investment out of it. It's probably the best.
Well, you know what threw me off? I did see that, but it was green. So
yeah,
that's what.
Yeah. So why don't you? And I'm going to do a second whack, and you know where I'm going on this one.
So that's what threw me off.
So the financials upgrade is the existing system, and there is an upgrade that actually is going extremely well right now with the finance department and the user departments. But what that does is just makes the old system work a bit longer. There is another conversation to be had: is how do you replace that and get a modern finance system that gives you the access, tools, record search, kind of reduce the manual workloads that might be typical. That is a much larger project and a resourcing and long-term discussion that Kip and I have kind of strategized around for about a year.
Yeah, so we're pulling that in from the longer term into the near term. I believe that is one of the mission critical items that we need to address. The upgrade, which is legitimately in green, gets us comfortably into the 2000s. It does not get us into a modern platform that we want managing the complex finances of the city. To credit of everybody there, they've managed to make it work. It's structural and sustainable, but it is not where we need to be. It is not where we should be. So we'll be coming to you with that larger conversation, and that's one of those as you mentioned earlier, there's some of these big lift projects that are super complicated. This will be one of those. Every single department in the city is touched by it, and all of the dollars that we manage in all of our budgets, the billions of dollars, flow through that system. You have to get it right. So we need to start working now to make sure that we are not only able to upgrade into the 2000s, but we are able to re-platform into the modern architecture and modern system that we need, and that will be a very big lift.
Okay, thank you on that. And then the integrated permit system is in yellow.
Yeah, you know, I would have put it red personally still.
I would too, but just I was just wondering.
So talk is cheap, the proof is in the pudding. We're coming back to the Ad Hoc Development Services Committee where some of you sit in April, and we have a very clear set of objectives and key results defined for Q1 of 2019. All of those are measurable and are being measured, and we'll come back with that clear report card. And at that point, I would feel comfortable moving that out of the red if the report card says so. But I would agree with you. It's pretty much in the red right now. The good news is we've got a lot of momentum on it, and I believe we will be headed toward green, but realistically, we should probably keep it back there until we've got the results to demonstrate that.
And in my defense, the feedback I got on this one is the reset is yellow, the project is still red. So just to be clear. So.
All right, so we'll look for a change in the color to red for the time being. Right? Thank you.
Back to you guys.
Okay, Regina, it's still you. Take it away.
Thank you, Kip. All right, so next on the agenda, we'll be discussing the second part of the Smart City Roadmap 2.0, which is our big rocks. And I will be discussing an update as to our process used to identify the high priority projects. So why is it important to prioritize? Ideally, we would want to track all the projects identified on the roadmap. However, it will be difficult to track over 160 projects. So we were able to consolidate some of these projects into categories for ease in future reporting and management. So what we did was we collaborated with all the departments on how to normalize an approach to prioritize these projects. What you see before you are the three criteria used to prioritize, which is impact, risk, and difficulty or ease to implement. Within each of these criteria, there were a few questions that that were used to help the departments to rate whether it's a high, medium, or low for each project identified on the Smart City Roadmap 2.0. Specifically for impact, the questions we asked were the number of projects it impacts, community benefit, or I'm sorry, the number of people it impacts, it's the community benefit, the impact on department operational capabilities, that's the operational improvements, or reduce the cost or for the overall benefit or increase revenue, which is the efficiency and the effectiveness. For the risk, we asked, what is the risk of not doing it? So that's our opportunity cost. And what is the risk of doing it, but then not doing it right? So that's the scalability. And the last, for the difficulty and ease to implement, how many departments or vendors are required to partner? And that gets into the complexity of the project. And has this ever been done before? Are we trailblazers? And so that's one of the uniqueness of it. So if any of these questions, for each of these questions, if any of them were answered yes, basically it was identified as all three of them were answered yes, to clarify. They were identified as a high priority project. And basically it really, the whole goal of this is to make sure that we can focus on influencing outcomes. So through this effort, we have identified a total of 38 high priority projects that are in progress. One clarification that I do want to note is that Access Eastside project was combined with the community Wi-Fi strategy. However, we recognize the importance of this project and it should be kept separate for future reporting purposes. Also, I do want to note that the departments not only prioritize the projects that are in process, but also they prioritized 23 projects that are identified in the initiating column. So very much so the importance of really recognizing the importance of prioritizing all these projects. The projects that are identified in the initiating column, do require the normal budgeting and council approval process. So, those are yet to be, initiated. So just for your reference. For your public viewing, we are going to be showing the next two slides on the high priority projects. So I'll flip to the next one. And then slide 19 and 20 will be shown on the screens for the public. And then also for members of the committee, we did provide a handout of the same slide just so it's easier for you to see. So on slide 19, or page 19, the slide shows the high priority projects for the IT roadmap, the user-friendly, and the equity themes. And then on slide 20, which is the right for the members of the public, show the high priority projects that have been identified for the smart infrastructure, the smart mobility, safe city, and climate smart themes. So what we'll do is we'll take a 2-minute pause for members of the committee and the public to review these high priority projects.
So again, bottom line here, this is our attempt to identify what are the projects that will result in innovation at scale that we need to be responsible for driving. There are still other things that the organization is doing that are innovative and valuable, but in terms of centralized focus of the city manager's office and making sure that these get driven as high priorities, we have suggested this is the list. So this is a good time to provide feedback on any projects that we might have missed or anything here that you want to emphasize about our approach to these projects. We'll talk a little bit more later about cadence and how we're going to keep you updated and status, but right now we've presented them without status so that we just get into the notion of, are these the right set of things that we should be approaching, especially over the next kind of 12 to 18 months, because our experience with roadmaps is that it's a 12 to 18 to 24 month to kind of digest and move everything through. Again, the priority decisions are also made in the context of the budget, but we wanted to make sure we have your agreement and direction that these are the right ones.
Mayor Liccardo.
Thanks. Appreciate all the work that must have gone into creating this. I know we've been updating all along, but what catches my eye is just in the infrastructure mobility space, there seem to be a large number that are in the initiating phase, not yet in progress. I mean, with autonomous vehicles, for example, we were already underway on a pilot with Mercedes. Is there a reason why that's still in the initiating box and not in progress?
Yeah, Reggie, based on your discussion with DOT, you want to clarify why we put that in the initiating column?
I think right now, just given the timing of that particular collaboration with Mercedes, they were thinking that this needs to stay in initiating until it's officially over into the full implementation stage. So that was my understanding of where it is today.
What determines if it's official in implementation? Do you have any idea?
So if it's fully funded, fully budgeted, staffed, and contracts executed for implementation at scale.
Okay, and that's not true for that pilot?
From my understanding, no, sir.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's a good question, Mayor. We can take that back and look and see if we've got it in the right column. Obviously, this is some of the bottoms-up versus top-down perspective we're seeing, so I think that's healthy. We'll go back and confirm that that's considered initiating as opposed to a pilot that's actually active.
Cool.
Right, because we have an agreement and we are initiating, we are working on the pilot. So I think that's a useful clarification.
Okay, great, thank you. And then a couple of these items, I know we've certainly been discussing them for a while. I'm thinking about, for example, the two Verizon projects, the vehicle fleet telematics and the traffic data service pilot. Just kind of curious, what do we think is holding us back in some of those spaces?
So on the traffic data services, I think that there was an assumption that when we actually signed the agreements with the telecoms that we had signed the Smart City Solutions agreements. What we did was decouple those and said we signed the agreement to begin the infrastructure deployment, but we gave ourselves another 90 days to negotiate the Smart City Solutions. So the Verizon TDS is on schedule to be signed in a couple weeks.
Great.
It's just a matter of all the scope has been identified and mutually agreed. Now we're just going through the lawyer process of signature. On the fleet telematics, we have an initial deployment of the fleet telematics, which is a couple hundred vehicles. And then we have the second phase, which was with Verizon's contribution, scaling that up to several thousand vehicles. So they broke it up into two phases, and the phase two hasn't been signed yet. It's in a similar state where we're waiting for the final signature. So again, that's why that showed up in initiating as opposed to in progress, because we got to get the signature done.
Got it. Okay, great. And then just a question just about the process. Kind of curious to how projects get here. I know they bubble up from the departments and so forth, but if you've got an example of a technology that you're using today, let me just take one example that I remember as part of a recent discussion. License plate readers. Police departments using several of them today. We use them for identifying stolen vehicles. And I've been told, and since we've had obviously a significant increase in auto thefts and auto burglaries, it's a big concern. I know there are cities that are deploying these now at every freeway off-ramp. So PD knows, okay, we got a stolen vehicle coming off of 101. So if you're talking about a different deployment of the same technology like that, obviously a much larger scale, does that mean it goes on to this, or does it become something that's not of interest to you because the technology is already being used, so that's up to the department?
I think where you'd see something like that emerge is within the Safe City strategy, and we are collaborating with both police, fire, and emergency management. So we're a little bit farther back on that. There are a number of projects, and we've done an update to both this committee and PISFIS, my favorite named committee, on those. But that's something that we would work with police or whomever on in the framework of the Safe City strategy. Part of the reason we haven't put individual public safety projects up is we haven't developed that prioritized list about all the ones you want us to work on, which ones really are business as usual and you can do them as an individual department, versus which are ones that are more complex or creative or have privacy concerns or other issues that we want to make sure that we address more comprehensively and citywide. So we would do that kind of sorting mechanism in collaboration with the police department, but we would be very open to adding things like that or other technologies to the roadmap as we define that Safe City strategy, which we have hopefully a Fuse fellow coming on board to help us with to do.
Great, thanks.
Vice Chair Jones.
Thank you. Again, another process question. There's a lot of items on here, and I know you said that they're not ranked or anything, but just in terms of just the sheer volume of these, what is the process in terms of where you're going to focus your resources and energy?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a next iteration already in the roadmap we've talked about internally, which is once we get this is the right set, we're going to do a bit of a stack ranking. and prioritization. And then you'll hear more about this in the cadence, but basically what we then do is we operationalize the execution. We have a regular meeting with the teams on these. They do a readout. We do a deep dive into any issues, problems, or roadblocks, and we prioritize that cadence based on two things. How important is the project? And how much at risk is the project? So the bigger, more at-risk projects we'll see more often. The lower priority, less risk projects, we may kind of do a nice check on every now and then, but it's just mostly to support the team and to appreciate them. So that operational cadence, which we've already set those series of meetings internally, is key to driving the execution on this. And you have a key part in that because conversations like we just had on the status of different items on the IT roadmap, we'll be having that here, and that will, I guarantee, reinforce and drive some of the execution in the field. So we need to do a next cut of prioritizing these 39 so that we have a sense of relative priority.
Right, and I just to give you my personal bias, I keep going back to bringing at the basics, that the items that are on here that we have to be good at, and we have to get right in order to do the other things are where we should focus a lot of our energy and time.
Thank you.
And then just another quick question, and this involves the privacy strategy. And I know that one item came up just fairly recently, like the rent registry, and there were questions that were brought up about privacy. Once we develop a privacy strategy and policy, would that be all-encompassing to encompass things like a rent registry or other items that are on the roadmap?
Yes, it should. Any technology tool or any use of technology should be in coordination and in compliance with whatever privacy policy and approach that we develop. Those principles we think should apply broadly to everything that we do.
Great. Thank you.
I just had a quick question. How confident are we that this is the totality of what's happening at the city? Is there, I mean, could there be potentially something that's going on, just a twinkle in somebody's eye or something that is not captured in this, or is this pretty complete?
You know, the kind of the good news about a city that's this big and this diverse with so many talented people is that there's always something going on that you don't know about in the city manager's office. Sometimes that's a bad thing, and sometimes that's a good thing. With innovation, it's a good thing. And part of what we want to do is not say, hey, you have to be on this list to innovate. So if Ramses Madhu is going off and doing something super cool in DOT that doesn't happen to be on the list, we're all supportive of that, and we don't expect this to be a comprehensive list. What we want it to be a comprehensive list of are what are the at-scale projects that we need to drive that are complicated and beyond business as usual. If there's lots of small-scale cool innovation, so be it. Just double down on that, and we will try to stay out of your way.
All right, excellent. Keep going.
All right, thank you. Now I'll discuss the third and final part of the Smart City Roadmap 2.0, the small wonders, with an update on the pipeline process and the projects identified to date. So the small wonders projects allows a space for small-scale experiments or emerging technologies. It allows a rapid review and delivery within a shorter time frame. The Small Wonders projects requires less staff time to deliver in comparison to our big rocks. So here's a closer look at the process of the Small Wonders pipeline. The process is comprised of a three-phased approach, as shown on the top bar, conceptualizing, executing, and celebrating. In accordance to Agile framework, this is similar to a Kanban approach, which means in Japanese signboard, and that refers to visualizing the flow of work. Overall, the process allows for visibility, structure to analysis, and decision-making, collaboration, and transparency. What we learned through this evaluation process is that we recognize that we do need to keep a track of the backlog, and as noted on the top left of the Small Wonders pipeline and how it goes through the process. These will be vetted out on a regular basis by both the City Manager's Innovation Team and also the Mayor's Office of Technology and Innovation Team. Also, not all ideas may meet the rating criteria that I'll discuss in the next slide, so we'll maintain a list of these deprioritized projects so that could be reevaluated in the future. Using this approach will give an opportunity for the city to learn or fail without impacting the big rocks. And also it allow us to time box these projects so that we can deliver quick results. So building upon the basis that we originally showed back in the beginning of this presentation, how we identified our big rocks, which were what is important to our community, is it core to what we do, and is it achievable at scale? With the small wonders, we added a fourth criteria. Does it get us ready for the future? And what you see before you is a thoroughly vetted out approach with the support of both the Mayor's Office of Technology and Innovation and the Civic Innovation Team on how we intend to identify viable projects into the Small Wonders pipeline. So here's a math equation down there. So we use a prioritization technique to sequence these projects called the weighted shortest job first. And that's what you see down below. And it is a weighted mathematical approach to help us objectively prioritize. And what this actually really means is that each of these priorities that you see listed is used to vet out a small wonders idea. And if all the criteria are met, then we assign a value to it, to each of the priorities. And once we will add all the values, and what that total shows is basically representing what we will lose if we do not do that project, basically an opportunity cost, and that's what we've shown on this slide is the cost of delay. The next piece of that equation is the job duration, which is basically how long does it take us to do this project. And dividing these two numbers will give us a ratio that is what we are calling the weighted job, shortest job first. And essentially what that does is it objectively prioritizes each of these projects with the end result giving us the quickest return or the biggest bang for our buck. So last fall, we did have an opportunity to fully vet this process of the weighted shortest job first with both the Civic Innovation Team and the Mayor's Office of Technology and Innovation Team during a retreat that we had, and you can see there is a lot of fun in prioritizing. But in all seriousness, we did formally go through an evaluation of 28 potential small wonder projects, and we realized that about 60% of these projects were either in the executing phase, which you see in that light blue shade, and also there are projects that are identified in the celebrating column that are close to completion. The projects identified in the conceptualizing column is where we will seek department support in delivering these small wonders projects. And as I stated before, we are taking an approach to really containing a list of all the backlog ideas that we're receiving. And so here is, for your review, is just a list of the backlog projects.
Reggie, I think just because it will probably come up, how often are we going to take a look at sort of the backlog items and prioritize them?
So that was going to be part of my reporting cadence, that we'll be looking at this bi-weekly with the teams and assess accordingly as the ideas keep coming. But this list just keeps growing, so thanks.
Reggie, I might interrupt here because I know
Sure.
the chair and I talked about this. If you look at that backlog, the fact we have a backlog and we can analyze it itself is starting to be innovative and data-driven. And one of the ahas that came up from me in the last couple of weeks is looking at this is right now, the vendors that are approaching us are all asking us to attach IoT devices to poles. Right, and so that immediately began to evolve my policy thinking, and that we've got a great policy around attaching small cells, and that's what the next presentation is going to be about. But the city actually doesn't have a policy for attaching other types of small wireless devices to poles, how we're going to pay for them, how we're going to manage the electricity. So in itself, creating the small wonder pipeline created a small wonder, and a realization, which is that we need to focus more on our IoT policies in this area. So before we got off the slide, I just want to point out that it's great for the city just to have this backlog that we can analyze every 2 weeks, and we'll begin to see the trends, recognize the patterns, and begin to develop some insights, which is we need to work more on our IoT policies.
Thank you. And also, recognizing that some of these ideas that have been vetted out through our criteria process, we do want to keep a list of all what have been deprioritized, because maybe there might be an opportunity later that these ideas could be implemented for the future. So that concludes the portion of my update on the Small Wonders process and the pipeline. So I could take a pause and then if you have any further questions.
Vice Chair Jones.
Thank you for that portion of the presentation. Just a follow-up on what Dolan mentioned in terms of this aha moment, in terms of our having policies and ordinances in place to address some of these new technologies. Is there a way, or do we have a strategy in terms of being able to execute or implement that process quickly? So we have a technology that you discover or that you want to implement, can we fast track it through, or is there a process to fast track these projects?
I mean, we have several mechanisms. We have our demonstration policy project, which we can use. I think there's two questions. One is, can we fast track getting policy in place so that we can make sure that happens? And that's actually part of the budget conversation we're having right now, is the fact that there's probably some policy areas where we need to move faster and need a heavier lift, and that's in privacy. And we've got one person that's trying to handle privacy and small cells and now IoT devices. And so that's part of the budget conversation. So I do think we need to put some more effort into our policy work, both privacy and now the IoT. Once we have that policy in place, there's several options we can go through. We can go through a Small Wonders pipeline, and if it comes up to the top, we can move forward with that. It can also be under a demonstration policy agreement, and it could just be a pilot within our existing departments, like we're doing with AT&T and Verizon. So there are multiple channels to move quickly on it. We need to get some policies in place to make sure we're not giving away pole space for free, or that we're invading privacy or other things that we need to address.
Great, thank you.
Mayor Carter.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Sorry about that. I just thank you. Just first, I just want to, looking at the criteria, I really appreciate the inclusion of get ready for the future as a criterion. Because I think it is really important this be forward-leaning work. Since it's Small Wonders, these are things that we'd be taking bigger risks on, and I think that's great. Just on the IoT space, I really appreciate your comments, Dolan. Has there been some thought, for lack of a better term, I know this wouldn't be a popular one to use in a government context, but a pay-to-play approach that says if a company wants to pay for the additional power that's needed to the pole and the additional workload, they can test it on our poles, and if they don't want to pay for all that stuff, then we don't have the bandwidth, kind of thing?
So it's kind of actually, that's our standard operating procedure in some respects. I mean, in the demonstration policy agreement, it's basically if it's zero cost to the city. Right. So we've learned through Terragraph and Eastside and our small cells pretty much what how we have to cost that out. Right. And we request that, and we're learning that just the project management of some of those pilots also needs to be added into the cost. So yeah, that's pretty much the way we are approaching this, which is we make sure we're addressing the cost of attaching to the pole, and expect, especially from a pilot perspective, where the technology firms are learning in a real urban setting, that's the benefit they get out of that, and the benefit we get out of that is experimenting with a potentially scalable product. So the short answer is yes, that's our demonstration policy agreement, and we've recognized that we need to upgrade that demonstration policy, which in retrospect is probably something we'll certainly bundle into some of our procurement work.
In terms of the cost that we would charge someone for using the pole, I'm just thinking about what's finite here. One is the power, right? And some poles just don't have the capacity to provide power for more stuff. And I guess the other might be interruption of signals, or the non-compatibility of devices. Is that right?
Correct, and structural. There's only so much you can put on it to be safe, and then there's aesthetics, design. There's only so much you can put on it and not be ugly. So those are all the limiting factors in sort of of what we would think about bundling, and again, and why we need a more comprehensive both set of policies and design standards beyond small cells.
Got it. And I appreciate it's difficult to craft a policy that preserves the beauty of the pole. So these are undoubtedly subjective to some extent. Is there any city that's figured out what their pole space is worth?
Well, I think that there's two separate values. Certainly in the small cell space, people have figured out what they're worth, and I think our city is kind of leading the way in making that happen. When it comes to IoT devices, it's pretty safe to say I don't think any city's actually achieved scale in IoT devices. I mean, the landscape is starting to become more and more apparent that these are small pilots that have done for free or done, at the cost of the vendor. And so I think part of our policy work will look at that and figure what the value of the pole is when these are really smaller wireless devices as opposed to the small cells. Something else is as battery life increases, power may not be as much of an issue on IoT devices because the batteries are getting better and better thanks to people in our backyard, and the devices are getting lower and lower on the power drain.
Right.
That's some of the low power wide area technologies that you're seeing come out, like LTE Cat-M, which is just a little power drain. So that's what we have to look at, is we kind of have to look forward, and things like power may not be as much of an issue, but the privacy and the structural and the beauty of our octopoles is also something we'll continue to keep in mind.
Okay. Yeah, in terms of sort of evolution of the market and maturity, I'd say we're a couple of years behind small cells. So we're kind of where we were a couple of years ago with small cells. We know it's coming. We know our poles are valuable, but exactly how much and how to do this, we still have to figure that out.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Sure.
Reggie, one other point that was worth making here is that there have been discussions about being technology-centric. If you look at the executing column and you look at the final 4 projects, which are STIR projects, those are actually all process improvements. And so there's not technology. It's actually looking at a challenge a particular department had around disaster relief or the asset management for affordable housing or tools, but processes around how to use the tools, or probably to me the street banners, which is some of the least technology specific. These are all process improvements. So I think the concept that these are all technology projects is actually not true. We're looking across people and process and technology, and for those STIR projects, all the departments all identified process improvements where we brought in pre-qualified entrepreneurs from our tech industry and surrounding industry to look at process improvements to make.
And Dolan, I do want to add to that with the STAR, it is very focused on our startups. So it does create a good space for opportunities with those emerging companies. And then also these projects do focus on customer benefit, so it does really look outward as well. So thank you. So understanding the workload will be increasing as we get ready for the future. We have a proposal on how we plan to execute our Small Wonders pipeline. So we have been extremely successful in building our ecosystem by partnering with private companies, universities, foundations, and nonprofits like Fuse Fellow and Encore with hiring, as you can see one example in our dais, and securing the outside talent to help us guide city towards innovation. However, building an internal workforce from within is more crucial to help support the growing demands. As a result, there is a need to implement a training program to give staff the skills they need to deliver innovation projects. So we propose the development of a new program called the Innovators Academy. It will help foster a new generation of leaders with an innovative mindset, promote cultural change towards embracing innovation, and help strengthen our partnership with the tech industry so that our city can continue to be the living lab for future innovation. We did have an opportunity to present this concept to the city department leadership in January, and they were just so energized to hear this, and also they just supported the idea. So more specifically, the Innovators Academy is anticipated to include a minimum of key 5 elements: leadership development, trainings, and which goes into a little bit more of like project management, agile methodologies, design thinking type skill sets. And we do hope to complement a lot of what the Human Resources Department is also initiating, so that there is an able to complement. Coaching with the tech industry and also city executive leadership, and network building with the tech industry and civic leaders, and then also exposure to the city and private sector leadership. So the initial phase will be an application process open to full-time city salaried and benefited employees with a minimum of 6 months of city experience. The requirements for selection will include their interests, current skill sets, and ability to balance between existing workload and Small Wonders commitment. The selected applicants will be required to commit to about 4 to 6 hours a week in addition to fulfilling their work obligations in order to participate in the program, and will require supervisor or department sponsorship for approval. The Innovators Academy will be held over the 9-month to 12-month period, so along the period of the Small Wonders project. And the initial testing phase would involve a minimum of 2 to 3 projects and identify about 8 to 12 applicants who will work in cross-departmental teams. So in completion of the Academy, the teams will have the opportunity to present the Small Wonder project to the committee and network with city leaders. Last fall, we did have an opportunity for 2 of our Department of Transportation staff, it was Ho Nguyen and Wilson Tam, who presented their innovation projects, the CEVP and the Urban Logic, and to the committee, and they were so enthused to just sit up here and tell their story. And so opportunities like that is what we want to give for this future group of leadership.
Yeah, and Reggie, just to interrupt for a couple seconds here. So CEVP is our Emergency Vehicle Preemption project to make sure that we don't get into acronym land here. And Reggie, I think the other thing that the word capstone was used many times, and I don't know why we didn't address it. So the idea here is that you go through this Innovators Academy and you learn new skills and how to actually deal with some of these new technologies and approaches to new technologies. But the key of all this is the Small Wonder is the capstone, right? And I think that's what we want you to walk away with here is that it's educating our people, powering them, getting ready for the future, but it's building that capacity to actually do the Small Wonder project. Because right now the existing staff are focused on the big rocks, right? And focusing on a big rock and then switching to a Small Wonder is a very difficult context switch, and that's kind of what we've seen over the last couple months and years with our demonstration pilot project. So this idea was to separate the Small Wonders from the big rocks. How do we actually then generate capacity for the Small Wonders? We will do that through internships and fellowships, but also to complement that, building leaders in the city through this Innovators Academy, and then the Small Wonder is a capstone, which is a fairly common practice in the private sector to have training sessions, and you actually capstone that training to prove yourself in the capstone project.
Thanks, Dolan. So our next steps will be the following: collaborate with the Human Resources Department and the innovation team to develop a work plan before March 2019. We will pilot potential courses to test by the end of spring or early summer of 2019. We do want to go through a selection process of potential candidates by August of 2019, and we'll begin the academy in the fall of 2019. So I will continue with the last piece of the presentation with regards to the project reporting. And so given that we are close to 40 high priority projects that are currently identified that are in progress, we recognize there is a need for accountability, so what you all raised. For the IT roadmap and the big rocks, internally within the Civic Innovation Team, we will seek a stoplight status update for the departments on a monthly basis so that we can report out to the committee starting in March. And then in addition, we will request departments to provide a detailed status update within the Civic Innovation Team on a monthly basis for the IT roadmap, and then a biannual or annual basis depending upon how many each department is managing. For the Small Wonders pipeline, both the Innovation Team and the Mayor's Office of Technology and Innovation Teams will be meeting biweekly to address the number of projects that have been identified in the backlog and continually vet those out bi-monthly, not bi-weekly. Okay. For the committee, we are recommending to present a verbal update on the IT roadmap on a quarterly basis, and on a monthly basis, we'll provide an update on the Big Rocks project, one high and one priority. Then for the Small Wonders, one project on a monthly basis. We plan to update the IT roadmap and the Big Rocks every 6 months, and the Small Wonders projects every 3 months. So this concludes my portion of the presentation. So is this the right approach and the cadence for the committee?
Mayor Liccardo.
Thanks. I just wanted to say how thrilled I am. Rajni, I love the concept of the Innovator Academy. I think it's fantastic that we're creating space for people to really grow into that role and take it on. My suggestion would just be that we would make it explicit in addition to project reporting and, you know, sort of the draw. We know we don't have a bunch of money to throw at people. We wish we did. But certainly recognition is really important. And I know we do that in different ways to our departments, but, you know, as I think, for example, about the vehicle preemption initiative that folks worked on, I mean, that's going to save lives. That's something we should be just screaming about in the media because the public deserves to know, and they should be impressed, and they should know about the good work that we're doing. And so I would just say, I think media should be explicitly in this so that individual employees really can feel the pride of their work, and you know, their friends in the community can say, hey, I read about this amazing job you did, and you know, that's a great way to motivate people to keep doing great work.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Jones.
Yes, I love this this concept too. In fact, I wanted to ask, is there any way for council members to be able to to participate in this program?
Someday, Councilmember Jones.
Someday. I also think it's a great opportunity for, you know, we talk about recognition. I think it's also a great opportunity to focus on retention. We have a lot of really smart people in the different departments that would just love to have this kind of opportunity to advance their career, to get exposure to new and cool and fun stuff. Yeah, so I think, you know, as we implement this, we should think of it as a retention and growth and development strategy as well. So it's really exciting stuff. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So seeing all this, also kudos on the fellowship, or not fellowship, is it fellowship?
Innovators Academy.
Academy. But it seems like this roadmap it's growing to be more than just a roadmap now. At first it was just kind of keeping track and keeping tabs of things, and now we're being proactive, which is great, but it leads me to the question of, are you guys adequately staffed to take on this extra work?
That's a great question, and the answer is no. And that's part of the budget conversation we're having. I think, you know, part of the advantage of me still being considered a private sector person, even though I've been here for 2 years now, is if I looked at another company, you'd have probably a program office of 6 to 10 people that are looking across all the projects, across, you know, the divisions, and tracking them and helping manage for success and identifying when is a green project really an orange project. And so right now we've got Reggie across the entire city, right? And we've already seen projects that were reported as green, then they quickly went to yellow, then pretty soon we found they were red, right? So part of the conversation, so my answer is bluntly, no, we're not. We're having that budget conversation as we speak right now of getting an additional, project manager type person that will help use this tool to manage for success. Because my concern is that this is we stretched out the cadence reasonably possible that Reggie can do it, but I think that we're going to find very quickly as the number of small wonders increase that we actually need 2 project managers, a Big Rocks project manager, and Regine's great for that because she spent decades in public works, and then we're also looking for someone on small wonders that can just focus on that and get those through the pipeline as well. Okay. Great question, thanks.
Yes, sure. Councilmember Davis.
Thank you. I just also want to add my kudos, and I'm impressed about the Innovators Academy, although when I look at the 5 key elements, I go, my first thought was, oh, we're going to lose them. So if we connect them with the tech industry, I'm a little bit concerned. We're going to train them real well and then lose them. So if there's anything we can do to head that off at the pass, would really appreciate your thoughts on that. Because I think this is awesome, but we want them to stay then if we're going to train them. And that's, I know it's everybody's dilemma, but that was my first thought. And then I thought, I shouldn't be so pessimistic, but I'm trying to be realistic about it.
No, it's a real risk, but sometimes when they leave, they come back.
Thank you, Kip.
Yeah. And I think this is exactly what we'll get are the type of people that you want to be promoting into increasing areas of responsibility. And the good news is we have lots of those opportunities over the next 3 to 5 to 7 years with the city. Yes. So I think if over time we prove the value of this, it becomes what I think of as sort of a Jedi network. And what you have is you have these people connected to each other across departments, and then they should rise rapidly in the organization. And so if we can demonstrate that over the course of the next several years, that not only is this a cool thing to do and get skills, but we can recognize and reward that in meaningful ways by giving you increasing responsibility and increasing pay, then we have the opportunity to retain people or have them come back after they take a little sojourn out.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's really important because this is the way we seed the culture change in the city, in the tower, and so that's why I was concerned about losing them, because we don't want the culture to perpetuate. We want the innovators to perpetuate and stay. And then in terms of the project reporting, I just want to thank you for laying it out so we know what to expect. There's not a lot of routine in this position, and I'm a person who really likes routine, so I appreciate the fact that you're committing to, okay, here's when we're going to report back to the committee so we know what to expect and what's coming. So thank you.
Yeah, yes, thank you. We were getting to the slide. And Councilmember Davis, I think a couple other things on your previous topic. First of all, I wanted to thank Kelly Parmalee and Jennifer Shimry, who've been very supportive of this effort. It was a radical change, and we kind of treaded lightly to make sure that it was going to fit in with the rest of their programs and projects, and they fully embraced it. So we're excited about that. The second thing is we envision this as kind of an application process. And so some of the concerns you addressed and making sure we're selecting the right people with the right view of their role within the city, I think is something we can also manage.
Thank you.
So are we done? All right.
You might.
Should we throw to commercial before we go to the next thing? Oh.
Sorry, we are done. I apologize. My mic wasn't on, so I'm going to pass it to Kip for closing remarks.
That's it. Again, we propose that this is the Roadmap 2.0 that would guide us for the next 12 to 18 to 24 months. We'll have the opportunity to revise on the cadence, and we'll be reporting out regularly. You'll see 3 things that happen over that period of time. We will be brilliant at the basics. We will be executing at scale on these big rocks, and we will be discovering these small wonders and developing our Jedi network as we go.
All right, thank you, Kip. Moving on to public comment then. There's one, what is this? I believe it's Blair B.
Thank you. This was very informative. today. I'll be interested to talk and learn more about the Academy ideas in the future. In questions about cybersecurity, the Santa Clara County Surveillance Tech Ordinance naturally has very clear, good beginning ideas written into this now open public process. With data collection, privacy, and cybersecurity, please have a process that can allow an everyday person to be able to ask how these practices can work, and how an everyday person can be allowed openings to continue to ask questions of cybersecurity. I don't want to be excluded if we go to war again. I want our good democratic practices in place. Please rely on the work of Supervisor Joe Simidian, who is working on the future of cybersecurity issues as well. And please remember the work of sharing and international cyber co-op ideas currently working in the South Bay, and that were helped started by people like former councilperson Rose Herrera back in 2015. Another issue is way up here. Because it seems you may have been going for a more public concept of the future of the UAV that was mentioned here, why should this preclude to continue to not have a yearly review process for it as it has been promised? You're looking at IoT stuff for the UAV drones, and that's interesting, but why can't it be a more public process anyway? Is it a corporate mindthink and a bloated, mostly selfish concept of individual inventiveness and to practice in almost complete secrecy still need to be considered first in how technology can be created or for use in a community? Or before the ideas of peace, responsibility, good civil rights, and good community democratic practices? That's my question about drone use, and good luck in this work. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Beekman. Seeing no more public commenters, do we need to accept the report? No motion?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, report accepted. Moving on to the next item.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, members of the public, again, Kip Harkness, Deputy City Manager. Now that you've heard the latest on the Smart City Roadmap 2.0, let's turn to reviewing what we've accomplished with the broadband strategy and our new small cell team since we last reported in just October. During the October committee meeting, we provided an update only weeks after the telco agreements were finalized. These historic telecom agreements established a $500 million private sector investment and provided the city with the funding needed to establish broadband governance and permitting speed and predictability without any impact to the general fund. Today, we'll provide you with an update on how we've progressed through our innovative partnerships, process improvements, and our plans to update our small cell policy. I'll turn the presentation over to Liam Crawford, Broadband Policy Analyst on the Civic Innovation Team, and Matt Lesh, Deputy Director of Public Works, to provide an update as well as some infotainment, a live demo of a new technology improvement to speed small cell permitting. So with that, Liam.
Thanks, Kip. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Honorable Mayor, committee members, and members of the public. My name is Liam Crawford, Broadband Policy Analyst in the City Manager's Office of Civic Innovation and Digital Services. I'm joined here today by Matt Lesh, Deputy Director of Public Works and Executive Sponsor for the Small Cell Team. Following Rajni's presentation of the Smart City Roadmap 2.0, Matt and I want to share an update on the city's small cell permitting and small cell policy refresh. Here you'll see an agenda. So Matt and I will review the city's overall timeline from agreements through execution, provide recent metrics regarding permitting improvements, and discuss how our broadband strategy and pricing structure is further incentivizing small cell deployment at scale. We also plan on providing a live demo, as Kip mentioned, of the online small cell screening tool, which Matt will walk us through. Before we do that, this slide here will show some context for how we got to where we are today. On May 1st, 2018, before the full broadband team was funded and formed, City Council amended the AT&T master lease agreement for a modest 140 node deployment. On June 26, 2018, the City of San Jose made history by approving 3 agreements with AT&T, Verizon, and Mobility, resulting in the largest small cell deployment in the country with over 4,200 small cells. With the agreement in place, the broadband team was formed to begin the process improvements, as mentioned before all agreements were finalized in September 2018. So during fall of 2018, the small cell team in Public Works initiated an initial pace of permitting of 10 permits per week. By winter of 2019, the small cell team achieved 30 permits per week for multiple carriers, thereby providing the speed and predictability that carriers emphasized as their primary area of concern when entering our agreements. So with that, I will turn it over to Matt Lush.
Thanks, Liam. So, Matt Lush, Deputy Director of Public Works. We inherited a nice mantra from both Dolan and the negotiations about speed and predictability, and so that is our first mantra of the small cell team, that we will work with speed and predictability. We also needed to establish a responsive and predictable process for the small cell permitting. We'll show you a bit of that here. And we received some validation for one of the mobile providers, and it sort of stunned us and took us to give some validation that San Jose's permitting team is hitting it out of the park. It gave great resolve to the team that we're working with here. Before sharing some specific successes, I wanted to recognize the hard work of the small cell team, led by Jeff Lee and Liz Koki, but by no means it's just two. It's an inter and intra-departmental team that we work in partnership with our small cell providers. Can we go to the next slide, please? We shared with the committee in October that the small cell team achieved rapid permit improvements, will achieve through people, process, and technologies. Before the team was funded and fully formed, we simply didn't have the processes and people in place to quickly permit. We were operating at a relatively slow and a relatively unpredictable pace. With council-approved small cell agreements, we established and funded a more robust team. And what I like to think of it as more of like a TSA pre-check, not front-of-the-line service, a wholly different line. So it was a wholly different line funded by the vendors for the work focused for them to provide that speed and predictability. Beginning in the fall of 2018 through today, the small cell team now is averaging about 30 permits per week, which meets the contractual obligations for the providers. That's great, more to go on. In parallel with each small cell permit, we need to keep in mind each provider usually needs to submit fiber permits for underground construction, connecting those fiber lines to those small cell nodes. So San Jose is one of the fastest fiber permitting turnarounds of any major city and continues to process fiber utility permits in about 10 days. We continue to partner with our vendors in asking what can we do better each time we meet with them. 3 things have been identified, and we'll continue to work on them. Enhance our tools, continue to enhance our tools for processing permits. Improve or help to improve PG&E meter releasing to be more predictable. Some things out of our control, but maybe we can enhance with relationships. And be open to discuss our power and conduit standards, things that we might have in our control. So if we can go to the next slide. These are our overall numbers for all 3 providers as of January. We have reservations for over 1,200 sites. We have permitted over 136. There's 72 under construction and 59 are on air. Brief update, as of last week, 65 are on air. So more current. So to consider,
what's on air mean, Matt?
Means the cell, well, I'd have to ask for translation.
Oh, okay, they're being used.
Yeah, so under basically after they're under construction, we do our final inspection, and then they're on air, meaning they're speeding up your cell phone.
Great. Fabulous. Sorry.
No worries. Thanks for the translation. But consider that reservation number of 1,200. That's about a third of the total build forecasted for the 3 vendors already. So they've reserved the sites for which they want to build. Some people doubted this small cell demand. We hope this should help eliminate some of that doubt. To align with Chair Deep, desire to have a little more show with the show and tell, I'll go through the holy terror of trying to demonstrate with eyes on an application we built. So I'll walk through this and kind of demonstrate. And so there's a lot of information on this page, and I'll try to hopefully make it a little clearer as we go along. So what's the purpose? We always want to define what the purpose is of any tool that we're building. It's first to aid staff and the vendors to help select the site for where their design will go. To orient around the page in the top right going around, it's just that they'll have a basic legend. This is a basic Esri web map. And you work your way around, you have all the dots with lots of colors. The legend should tell what those dots will mean. I'll work through it in just a moment here. And so all those dots tell us something. You'll have up to the top left, you'll have a search bar that helps, and we can control which things they're searching for. So you could just put a basic address, or a vendor who's standing out next to a pole that has a pole ID stamped on it can literally type in the pole ID and it zooms right to it and gets some information about it. And so we can control what layers are going to be there and what specific things. So we were trying to make this as a way, because before, they literally would send us a spreadsheet. That spreadsheet would go off into the ether, people would chew on that spreadsheet, come back and say no, or yes, or we want to talk about these. And this way we could kind of indicate, don't ask about this one. We're telling you now, don't ask about this one for these reasons. And so they might want to seek something in that area to solve whatever coverage they might need. So we wanted to make this simple map so it's accessible in a browser, so you don't need any special tools. We want to take this complex data sets which are sitting behind this, and so you don't need GIS skills and you don't need GIS tools to work through this. So we didn't need to train staff, we didn't need to train vendors, we just give them access. Now, interestingly, historically, the data about our street slides was sort of secluded, not necessarily open and shared, because a lot of it was because it was dirty. The data is dirty. There's not a lot of, our data around streetlights has a lot of dirt to it, meaning that they're not all completely accurate. We were up front with the vendors, like, look, we're not promising this is perfect, but this is better than telling you nothing. So that was our hope, is to get stuff out there. And really, it's just because it lacked a lot of TLC, and so we're giving a lot of love right now to the data. And we're arming our users with the information to improve this data. So they'll tell us, hey, this information is wrong, so we'll go in and fix it. And we have staff that are designed to focus on this. So let's zoom in a little bit and mess around. And so here, fingers crossed, everything goes all right. Mr. Chair, do you?
And Matt, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. So just to set a little context, we're in a terrifying world. So you are now a telco. Right, that's what, I mean, the user of this tool is a telco or their engineering firm. So just to kind of set the context of where this is all coming from, you may run away and have nightmares from this, but now you're actually a telco trying to install, figuring out where you're going to install small cells in the city of San Jose.
So there's a lot of dots, lots of stuff on here. There's 66,000 or so streetlights, and so how do we sort down for which things are we tending to say no to? Let's indicate. We've told them why already. We're not going to put on any traffic signals. It's too complicated for now. And so we turn those red, or indicate that we're not going to have those. And so you can go into the actual poles themselves and find different status between occupied poles or other things that are ineligible, and you can turn them on and off. It's pretty intuitive and pretty responsive. So far, so good. Fingers crossed again. So if I turn off all of them, there's no streetlights. But if I wanted to indicate which ones have been reserved, they have Wi-Fi only, the Facebook Telegraph ones, signal poles. And so if I wanted to get down to things that are requested and accepted already, you can indicate these are all poles that have information about them. And we can select them. It shows a pole number, so it has intuitive information about it. The icons mean something. When I turn them on, they show up in the legend what it means. I mean, it should be fairly straightforward and intuitive that someone would expect the information on. We can control what information is displayed as long as we have the information. We could display it next to the pole if we know, like if it's a type of pole or if it has an LED light on it or not. Those kind of things we can display. So then what kind of comes into some of the play for some of these vendors? What would preclude them from wanting to work at a particular area? Let's say we just paved it 2 months ago, and then there's a pavement moratorium. And I already said that there's going to be a fiber permit to connect to this pole. That trenching would be in a moratorium-laden street. That doesn't preclude them. We've waived moratorium, but then there's just business consequences to how they have to restore that street. And so how do we tell them that there's a moratorium? Well, we put on the moratorium streets on there, and so they can turn colors. They can see when their streets the moratorium falls off. So maybe I'll work on the ones that are expiring in 2019 and de-accelerate the ones that are going towards 2020. Now, that's great, but now we also have paving that's forthcoming. And we'd like to project when the paving is forthcoming so that maybe they can get in front of that so they don't have to deal with any moratoriums to delay any of their work. And so we're working on getting, and we have in there now the current list of prospective street paving projects so they can get in there and do that now. Measure T will have some impact to it with enhanced paving that will have to be a little more aggressive. Measure B came in, there'll be even more funding. So there'll be a lot of paving going on. So we're trying to work with DOT and get this information ready to go so we can project and provide this information, being open as transparent, and so we can tell everybody what's going on there. We also built this with future purposes in mind. So oftentimes we make the mistake of solving one problem with one tool. Well, what could be the future use of this? What could be the future implications of this? So one of the vendors, they asked us, it would be really great if we didn't even have to tell you if we could just go in and reserve it ourselves, and we could log in and reserve this site ourselves. And so we're working on that in the back. Again, there's user rights and how do we get to access? How do we log those things in? So we're working on that. Permitting performance. How do we track how things are going in a spatial mode? So we can see where they're permitting and see where they're progressing and kind of track our performance using something like this. And then there's the very important part of equity of deployment. So I'll zoom out, there's all sorts of red, lots of reserved sites, but how are they deploying those things as well? Where are they constructing? Do we view that as kind of compliance with our equity component that we had in our agreements? So we have that kind of on our work plan as well. My hope is that an observation is like, well, no kidding, this should be available. It seems pretty straightforward. Well, this is actually about 10 different data sets that couldn't reside together 5 years ago. And so we've been working for a long time. I mean, this literally was not possible 5 years ago. We didn't have our data sets kind of combined in a data model in a way that they can all be formatted and just overlaid and just work. On the GIS side and our spatial team in Public Works, we've been working for about a half decade building that data repository that has the constructs in there. You're probably first, again, what does this have to do with permitting? The answer is everything. If you want to go to scale, this has to be done. We have to be able to project this, spin this up fairly quickly, iterate, and put this thing out. If we have to put out 80 permits a week, all of the small cell ones and all the fiber ones to go along with this, if you think about it, that's 30 team hours per permit per week to crank these out. We need tools like this that are intuitive and simple and light, that don't take a bunch of training to teach folks how to figure this out, and then we need to keep iterating and add more scale to it.
If we could drop the mic at this point, we would, but the mics are attached. The one thing that I would add to this is the kind of the yes and. We are using the small cell permitting tool as a bit of the tip of the spear for the larger development services transformation. So for those of you who are on the other committee, one of the items that you know that is one of our key results for this quarter is using the small cell team to pilot ePlan and allow us to have a fully electronic plan review and plan check. And so the efforts like this that you see are extremely important and useful for permitting, and all of the lessons that we learn, we will be applying to the larger development permitting questions for people who are coming in with alternative dwelling units or getting that water heater permitted and all of those. So we appreciate to Matt for his leadership on both of these teams at once.
And also add to this, another drop the mic is no impact to the general fund. All of this was funded through the telco agreements, which is a value exchange. It would add no impact to the general fund. Our option is there's a company that would love to take 35% of our revenue, and they paid several $100,000 to have Deloitte build this tool for them. We built it internally at no impact to the general fund.
You can drop the mic now.
Thanks, Matt. That was a great presentation. I'm glad, fingers crossed, worked. Smooth, everything went well. I think moving on, it's important to keep in mind that small cells are paving the way for the future and are a key and critical component for our entire broadband strategy. Here you'll see the small cell that resides right outside of City Hall, accompanied by a speed test. The speed you see here was pulled off of this node, and it's about 50 times faster than previous recorded speeds at this location. And in addition to that increased speed, you'll also gain efficiencies and lower latency and increased upload speeds, which are all critical to deploying the next generation of technology. Furthermore, it's important to note that the second generation of this technology moved us from voice to text, and each subsequent generation of that technology since has led to new capabilities and new innovations. So without 4G, we wouldn't have technology capability that we've grown so accustomed to, such as apps that have paved the way, Waze, Uber, Instagram, and of course, My San Jose. So the next generation of wireless technology will enable innovations that we have yet to even envision, as you can imagine, and it's critical that the city continues to focus on expediting permitting in order to enable this technology moving forward. In order to continue to realize this speed and predictability that Matt and Dolan and Kip have addressed, the city intends on further incentivizing providers and through the pricing structure that you see here. As you can see, the more small cells that a provider deploys, the lower the overall usage fee per site location. At the direction of council and the advice of the city attorney's office, we will continue our small cell policy work by updating the master lease agreements to reflect this pricing structure and other lessons learned from our telco negotiations. So with that, I'll turn it back over to either Kip or Dolan for any final comments.
Yeah, can we just go back one slide,
Sure.
please? So, I mean, I think the key here is that we said we were going to negotiate these agreements to understand what worked from a pricing structure, and then we'd revisit our whole small cell policy. Well, what we negotiated did work, and so it is our policy. So this is kind of like the disappointing, non-eventful conclusion to our small cell policy work is that we're going to go back to not our master agreements, but our master licensing template that every telco could use. We're going to update it with this pricing structure and other lessons learned, and that basically will be our small cell policy work, and that work largely is complete, and we're operating in business as usual. Then we'll use that to go back and look at our overall IoT policy.
And that concludes our presentation. We're open to take any questions or feedback you may have.
Councilmember Davis.
You had me at giving a lot of love to the data. As Kip knew, he was watching me when you said that, Matt. Thank you. I think the small cell screening tool is awesome, and clearly your enthusiasm for this project shows, so I know that you really are giving a lot of love to the data. And it's great for multiple reasons. I think we know that being transparent and making it easy for the businesses makes them go faster and we get the tech faster, but I know that one of the reasons that you're so passionate about this is that it cuts staff time down, way, way down, and makes it a lot easier for staff. And I think that's making their lives easier is a really good thing for many reasons. I just have one question about the pricing on the last slide. How does the FCC action impact this? You guys didn't talk about that.
Yeah, from our perspective, it's business as usual.
It doesn't impact it at this point. As the council knows, we have an action against the FCC order that attempts to limit the pricing.
Right.
But until we hear from the court, otherwise it's business as usual with regard to our pricing.
So we haven't had any injunction or anything that we can't do this?
No.
Okay, excellent. Thanks.
Vice Chair Jones.
I just wanted to just echo that was a great presentation. Very impressed. You know, you can't drop the mics literally, but you can take the little covers off and drop that. Just make sure you put it back on. But I also want to. You had a quote from a unnamed mobility provider, and I actually talked to AT&T, and they were singing the praises of the process. So I want to get there's another testimony. I don't know if it's the same one, but AT&T was very complimentary of the process, how their permits were being handled, and the speed and efficiency. So you should be very proud of what you have accomplished.
Thank you. As you know, we have to love all of our telecom children equally, but in different ways. So I was not able to say who made this quote, but generally speaking, all of our service providers currently are very satisfied. And I think that's key, because if we can keep the relationship strong, both on the permitting and the telecom agreements, there's just less angst that would cause them to anything to go sideways in these agreements.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Liccardo.
It really fired up about this work. Thank you, Liam and Matt. This is really impressive. Question went through my mind, since allegedly the industry is having these problems nationwide in localities in terms of moving through the process. Clearly, we are discovering things, and particularly some of these things could be commoditized or monetized, since someone else is charging 35% of revenue for something like this. Could we go hustle to other cities and say, for 5% of your revenue, we'll let you adopt our, okay, 10. Deb says 10.
Very entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Well, certainly if any of the smaller cities in Santa Clara County that are adjacent would like to partner with us on this, we'd be certainly open to exploring something like that.
Yeah, I just think, clearly we're on to something. It helped that obviously we negotiated solutions that got us resources to enable us to be able to do this work, but we also have really bright people like Matt who are helping to create these processes. And A, I'd like for us to go get credit, and B, if there's a revenue source and we can help other cities, that could all come back to our digital inclusion fund. So I just throw that out. I'm happy to get out there and start hustling for you as your sales manager. Anyway, other question I had just as we're looking at this, so we're able to satisfy, we're basically able to turn around the permits within 30 days on average, is that right? And the FCC mandate is at 60 right now?
Correct. The uncontested FCC ruling is anywhere from 60 to 90, depending on the type of request.
Yeah.
The FCC ruling that's currently on the landscape would, if it were to move forward, would require us to permit in 60 days.
Okay, so we're fine in that regard. Obviously, and you guys know there's a big political football right now, and it seems to me that's important for us to share. And I think Shereen and I and others will try to help in sharing that message, because I think it's important to show what can work. In fact, another important thing for me is to resume my Twitter war with a FCC Commissioner, Brendan Carr. And so I thought I should ask you guys permission for it. Well, your feedback before I send this out. I was going to say City of San Jose is averaging 30 days to permit hundreds of small cells. It's part of the largest deployment of small cells in the U.S., and we're doing it twice the speed of FCC mandates through partnership with the industry, not with industry pandering FCC regulation. Is that an accurate statement? Okay, I just want to make sure before we resume.
I will allow Ed at any time to on my mic, but yes, our current average during the time we've been funded under the agreements with the process improvements to be able to execute, we're averaging about 30 days. Some days it's a little higher, some days it's a little lower, but I think on average 30 days is what we're doing. And so I hit the send button is probably okay.
Okay. So we think we can maintain that, because I know he's going to respond to me as soon as we miss it by a day.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is, we're not all of the equation. The service providers have engineering firms, and sometimes the engineering firms drop the ball. So we're trying to look at this end to end, right, and partner not only with the telcos but their engineering firms and hit these days. So the good thing with our agreements is if we need to refresh our drawdown account, if we need to discuss further investments in speed and predictability. The telecoms have said that's fine to come advertise that, right? They need speed and predictability.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to whine and complain about cost, but at the end of the day, if we can give them speed and predictability, they're going to be okay with any reasonable win-win investment that needs to be made here.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. Well, I just want to jump on the bandwagon of good job, and I'm very pleased to that you guys took in my input and tried to do more demonstrative, like interactive, what I called during our meeting, stupid human tricks type stuff to make this more infotainment centric. So anyways, we have public comment. Blair, come on down, sir.
Hi. Is the screen cell tool? I can't remember what I just called it, but you had a very good tool up there. The screen cell tower tool. I think I gave it the right name. I can't remember it here right now, but when I looked it up, I couldn't find it on your website. If I punched in the right name for it, you know, that it's indicative of a problem that you guys have with simple stuff like this, and I can't find it on the public website. But thank you if it is public, and that is a great feature that can be public, and thank you. I am, you know, I guess this is one of those items that I am Mr. Unknowledgeable about. I think that'll be the name I'll use, Mr. Unknowledgeable. And but, you know, try as I might, I'm up here to just worry. And, you know, it's with all that deployment that you're working towards, it's going to possibly cause sickness. And I think there's going to be some weird bell ringing I've just been learning about. I hope you guys are prepared for the different frequency levels that 5G can offer. The ringing in people's ears is going to be different. And, you know, I hope you're prepared for those things. I hope you can talk about those things publicly, as I'm trying to do here. That could be a good way to prepare people. And what I've always tried to say here is, you know, as this technology is coming in, I hope you don't work at streamlining it really quick, and that people, you know, in communities, when they try to organize to want to talk about this publicly, as we're doing here, that you can allow them a little extra space and time if they need to, so we can have a good conversation about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair. All right. Do we have a motion? All right. All in favor? Aye. All right. Now we have to go to public comment. Blair, would you like to come back down?
I had a few words. The door has been opening. That, you know, you guys have been doing so great this past month and a half and how to talk about issues again. It's been really great for me, and I thank you very much. And I wanted to learn how to start talking about December 4th and the issues that happened on that day. And you know, just the Google process, you've opened the door to allow people to talk about that again. Thank you with your words about Diridon Station this week. So I want to start commenting on it and reporting about it. And you mentioned some words here today that I'll be mentioning in the future, in the coming weeks and months. But there were just so many issues here that I just figured I could wait a bit longer to talk about the December 4th issues, to concentrate on what was talked about here today. It was very informative and interesting. And with that said, there were three issues. The academy, I hope that you can introduce the ideas of civil rights practices and civil protections as a part of this whole technology process, and that can be a tool and an invitation for what people can learn when they enter this process here in San Jose. And I think that's, I mean, it's just such an important part of this whole innovation process at this time that I hope you can learn how to really, you know, you guys want to be cool and slick about it, but, you know, sleek is how I've been using, but I just really hope you can learn how to give it, love and robustness, I guess is the word nowadays. And so good luck with that. And that also brings up ideas of procurement also, that, your procurement with the procurement process, to somehow bring that in. The civil rights and civil protections is just vital to our future. It is what is our sustainability next to good environmental practices. And so I just hope you can share that. And finally, about the privacy policy, the rental registry stuff, that's awesome that Chappie Jones mentioned that. It brings up the ideas that can develop more ideas and more ideas and more ideas about privacy policy issues and for other issues and items. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. Thank you for sticking with us, everybody in the chamber and out there in TV land. I'll try to work on some ending in the future, maybe some sort of Jerry Springer style, reflection at the end. But for now, meeting adjourned.